Before we dive into this thrilling story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest uploads. Your support keeps us going. Now, let's get into it. At Christmas dinner, my mother-in-law handed out diamond earrings, designer bags, and thick envelopes of cash to everyone at the table, except me. She called out names like a game show host, basking in the admiration, clinking her glass of vintage champagne with theatrical flair. For Clara, for her new business, she said with a proud smile as Clara unwrapped a limited edition Dior clutch. For June, because she's been such a rock for the family, she added, as June held up a box with Cartier's unmistakable logo. Even the children got gifts, luxury toys, custom-crafted dolls, tiny iPads and glittery cases. Then she looked at me. Her lips curled into a polite smile so well-practiced it almost looked real. "Oops," she said, her tone sugar-sweet and slow like honey laced with venom. "You slipped my mind." The entire table laughed, except for me. Adam, my husband, chuckled softly and gave my hand an awkward squeeze under the table, as if that tiny gesture would cancel out 6 years of being invisible. I smiled back at her. That calm, even kind of smile that makes people nervous, because they can't tell whether it's forgiveness or the beginning of something else. She had no idea what I had slipped into her life. As the laughter died down and the next course was served, some rare, absurd French delicacy with a name no one could pronounce, I looked around the grand dining room. The chandelier above us glowed with low golden light, casting soft shadows over the ivory tablecloth, the crystal glasses, the silver flatware. Everything was curated, expensive, false. Veronica, my mother-in-law, loved appearances more than she loved people. Her life was a portfolio of curated lies. The perfect house in the perfect neighborhood, the family photos with professionally coordinated outfits, the charitable events she, selflessly, hosted. She called herself an advocate for women, a mentor for the broken. But I knew the truth. I knew what lay underneath that flawless image. I had been collecting it. It started as curiosity. No, that's a lie. It started the first time she humiliated me in front of her friends, introducing me as Adam's little hobby. It started the night I came home from our anniversary dinner and saw her Facebook post about Adam, captioned, "My favorite man in the world. My real soulmate." It started the moment I realized that no matter what I did, I would always be on the outside, looking in. But I didn't cry. I learned. I watched. I remembered. And eventually, I began to dig. Veronica liked to believe she was untouchable. But the truth was, she was sloppy, arrogant in the way that people become when no one has ever told them no. Her pride was her blind spot. She left trails. Patterns. Names. Transactions. I wasn't just Adam's wife anymore. I was the quiet presence in the background who noticed things she assumed no one would. And tonight, while she laughed about forgetting me, I was already 3 steps ahead. There was a small black envelope in my handbag, resting just beneath my phone. It wasn't for her, not yet. It was addressed to someone else. Someone who would know exactly what to do with it. Inside it were names, account numbers, flight logs, wire transfers, and one very specific form, the kind that triggers an investigation when it lands on the right desk. But that would come later. For now, I let the scene play out. I played the role I was given, the forgotten wife, the outsider, the one who didn't matter. Let them smirk. Let them dismiss me. Let them laugh at their own cruelty. Because none of them knew what was coming. None of them realized they had already lost. As I raised my wine glass in a silent toast to Veronica across the table, I could see the light catching the diamond earrings she had gifted her daughters, glittering, brilliant, soulless. Just like her. Merry Christmas, I thought. You forgot me. But I remembered everything. They say when you marry someone, you marry their family too. I used to think that was a cliché, something people said to warn you but never really meant. But it's true. I didn't just marry Adam, I married into Veronica's world. A world where appearances were everything, where reputation trumped truth, where cruelty wore pearls and smiled with blood-red lipstick. Adam's family was tight-knit, like a closed circle drawn in permanent ink. There was no way in, not for me, not for anyone. Veronica, the matriarch, ran the family like a monarchy. Her daughters, Clara and June, were her loyal ladies-in-waiting. They worshipped her, obeyed her, and in return, she rewarded them with wealth, validation, and an eternal place at her table. I was never offered a seat. Not really. I was tolerated. I was Adam's wife. A title with no weight, no voice, no substance in her world. When Adam and I first started dating, I didn't notice it. Veronica was charming, welcoming in the way wealthy women often are, performative, polished, sweet with a bitter edge you can only taste later. She invited me to a brunch once, at her estate in upstate New York. It was beautiful, a long table beneath an arbor wrapped in blooming wisteria, fine china with gold trim, mimosas served in tall flutes. She made me feel special. She asked questions, complimented my dress, even pulled me aside to say, "You're good for Adam. He needs grounding." I was foolish enough to believe it. The first real crack came after we got married. Our wedding was small, my choice, but elegant. Veronica was furious. "People will talk," she said. "They'll think Adam's settled." I remember standing in the bridal suite, in my gown, while she adjusted her diamond bracelet and told me flatly, "You're lucky to be in this family." After that, the invitations to family trips stopped arriving. I'd see photos online, Adam on a yacht with his mother and sisters in Greece, a ski lodge weekend in Aspen, a vineyard tour in Napa. "It was just a last-minute thing," he'd say. "I didn't think you'd want to come." Every family gathering felt like a test I wasn't meant to pass. Thanksgiving, birthdays, Easter brunch, I was always seated at the far end of the table, always asked surface questions, never included in the real conversations. Veronica had a way of smiling directly at me while saying things like, "Some people just aren't very social, are they?" Or, "I suppose not everyone's meant to understand tradition." Clara and June followed her lead. They were subtler, but their eyes held the same polite contempt. I started shrinking. I told myself it didn't matter, that Adam loved me, that we had our own life. But even in our home, Veronica's presence loomed. Adam spoke to her daily. When we fought, he'd quote her. "My mom says you're being too sensitive. My mom thinks you're not trying hard enough. My mom just wants what's best." I began to wonder who he really belonged to. The worst part was that Adam never truly saw it. He thought Veronica was just old-fashioned. That Clara and June were a little intense. When I tried to tell him how isolated I felt, he'd laugh and say, "You're imagining it. You just don't know how to be part of a big family." So I stopped trying. Until last Christmas. Veronica's holiday parties were infamous. Grand, glittering, meticulously planned down to the napkin folds. This one was no exception. Her estate looked like a Christmas card exploded inside it. Lights everywhere, garlands on every banister, music playing softly in every room. Staff in black and white uniforms floated through the halls with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. There was even a horse-drawn sleigh outside for photos. It was all so much. I arrived with Adam at 6 o'clock sharp, wearing the dress I had agonized over for weeks, emerald green velvet, classic and clean. Veronica took one look and said, "Green is such a bold choice. Not everyone can pull it off." She didn't mean it as a compliment. Clara hugged Adam and whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. June gave me a stiff smile and said, "Love your hair. It's very different." No one asked how I was. No one noticed I hadn't been around in months. I was a ghost in their perfectly lit world. Dinner was served in the ballroom, beneath a chandelier imported from Vienna. Long tables covered in white linen, place cards and calligraphy, plates stacked in 5 layers. Veronica sat at the head, of course, with Adam to her right and Clara to her left. I was several seats down, next to one of June's children who spent the entire meal playing with a tablet. Then came the gift ceremony, as Veronica called it. She stood up, rang a little silver bell, and began handing out wrapped boxes with names scrawled in gold. One by one, she bestowed luxury items on her beloved family. For Clara, who worked so hard this year. For June, my rock. For Adam, my heart. Each gift more extravagant than the last. She didn't look at me once. When the last box was given, she clapped her hands together and beamed. "Isn't it wonderful to give?" Clara giggled. June applauded. Even Adam looked pleased. Then Veronica turned to me and blinked as if surprised. "Oh, Lena! I forgot you. Oops. You slipped my mind." The room laughed. Not cruelly, but casually, like this was just a harmless joke, like forgetting me was as natural as forgetting to buy milk. Adam gave me an awkward glance, half apologetic, but he didn't say anything. No one did. I sat there, smiling. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel humiliated. I felt clear. There was something sharp and cold in that moment, something that clicked into place inside me like a key turning. I wasn't going to cry in the bathroom or shrink into silence. Not this time. Because I hadn't come empty-handed. There was something I had prepared, something they didn't know about. But it wasn't time yet. That night, after we got home, I lay awake in bed while Adam snored beside me. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how long I had tolerated being made small, being overlooked, being the butt of a joke. I thought about how Veronica's cruelty had never been overt. It was always coated in sugar, wrapped in manners, protected by power. And I decided I wasn't going to play along anymore. The next morning, I opened the folder hidden in the back of my closet. It was black, unmarked, thin but heavy. Inside were the first pieces of what would become something much bigger: a timeline, a set of names, a few numbers I had written down after an overheard conversation between Veronica and her estate manager. Veronica ran a nonprofit called the Veronica Foundation, a charity for empowering women post-divorce. It was her pride and joy, a tax write-off masquerading as benevolence. She claimed to have helped hundreds of women start over. What she didn't know was that I had started looking into the organization months ago, after a friend of mine, a lawyer, mentioned that some of Veronica's filings didn't make sense. At first, I thought maybe it was nothing. A mistake. But the deeper I looked, the worse it got. The numbers didn't add up. There were huge sums marked as miscellaneous expenses, payments to consulting firms that didn't exist, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, and then, most damning, a series of wire transfers to an account in the name of Harold Westwood. Harold was Veronica's late husband. He had died 6 years ago. The account had been dormant for years, until suddenly it wasn't. I spent nights combing through documents, watching tutorials on financial tracing, calling in favors from friends in compliance departments. Every piece led to another, and another, until I had a map. Veronica wasn't just mismanaging a foundation. She was laundering money through it. And not small amounts. Millions. I printed everything. I triple-checked every detail. I compiled it all into one file. Then I made 3 copies. One I kept. One I mailed. One I hid. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about knowing the truth. It was about finally seeing clearly. That Christmas night, I stood at the window and looked out at the snowfall coating our backyard. The lights from the neighbor's house blinked gently in the dark. Inside, Adam was asleep, his arms stretched across the bed like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. I didn't hate him. But I didn't love him the same way anymore. Something had changed. And when the time came, he'd feel it too. But first, I had to finish building the fire. Then I'd decide when to light the match. I learned a long time ago that the best way to study a predator is not to confront it, but to observe it. You wait. You watch. You become small, invisible, a harmless shadow in the corner. And while they believe you're nothing, you're collecting everything. Veronica had no idea I was watching her. After that Christmas dinner, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Clara posted photos of her Dior clutch on Instagram, captioned, "Thank you, Mom. Best gift ever." June did an unboxing video for her Cartier bracelet. Veronica, of course, posted the group family shot, everyone gathered around her perfectly set dinner table, all glowing and laughing, except me. I was barely visible at the edge of the frame, half cut off by the angle. It was almost poetic. Adam didn't mention the gift incident. In fact, he acted like it hadn't happened at all. He took me out for brunch 2 days later, bought me flowers, kissed my cheek like a peace offering. "Mom's she forgets things sometimes," he said over Eggs Benedict. "Don't let it get to you." I didn't. Because by then, I had something more important than his comfort. I had leverage. My job, once upon a time, was in financial compliance. Before I married Adam, I worked for a firm that specialized in forensic auditing, looking for signs of fraud, laundering, embezzlement. I'd been good at it. Too good, maybe? I left after my department was absorbed by a larger company, and Veronica had called the timing fortuitous. She said it was a perfect moment for me to focus on family. In hindsight, that moment had been the beginning of her dismantling my independence. But the skills had never left me. After Christmas, I began building something quietly. I set up a workspace in the back corner of the guest bedroom, somewhere Adam never bothered to enter. A second laptop. A secure drive. Notebooks with color-coded tabs. I treated it like a project. A case file. Only this time, the subject wasn't a faceless CEO or a crooked hedge fund. It was my mother-in-law. The Veronica Foundation claimed to allocate 92% of its donations to direct support programs for women. On paper, it was impressive: small business grants, legal aid, housing assistance. But the numbers told a different story. In 2022, the foundation raised $4.8 million. Only $640,000 could be traced to actual disbursements. The rest went into a complex web of consulting fees, marketing campaigns with no receipts, and shell companies like Vero Strategies and Rosebridge Consulting. Both were registered in Delaware, anonymously. But the payments they received matched the foundation's marketing expenses, down to the cent. The names on the bank records, the ones I managed to get from a very old friend with access to commercial filings, were familiar. One was an old college roommate of Veronica's. The other was a woman who had once dated her late husband. Neither had actual businesses. They were proxies. The rabbit hole got deeper. There were also property records. A lake house in upstate New York under a trust connected to the foundation. A penthouse in Miami registered to an LLC that received monthly development funds. Neither were listed as assets in the foundation's disclosures. They were invisible to donors, hidden under layers of obfuscation. Veronica had built a charity empire and hollowed it out from the inside. And nobody had noticed. Because nobody had looked. She was brilliant in the way villains always are, bold, untouchable, protected by reputation. She hosted women's luncheons, gave keynote speeches about female empowerment, partnered with influencers and politicians. Her face was on magazines. She had been profiled as a modern matriarch, elegant, wise, benevolent. But behind the curtain, she was bleeding the organization dry. And I had proof. Each night, after Adam went to sleep, I added to the file. I categorized transactions. Cross-referenced addresses. Built flowcharts. I even started listening to public interviews she'd given over the years, matching her statements to financial data. The more I found, the calmer I felt. Like I was reclaiming something piece by piece. Control. Clarity. Myself. There was a moment, about 3 weeks in, when I almost stopped. I sat at my desk, staring at the numbers, the evidence, the weight of what I was doing pressing into my chest like a stone. This wasn't a revenge fantasy anymore. It was real. If I released this, it would destroy her. Not just embarrass her, annihilate everything she had built, ruin her reputation, maybe even lead to prison. And it would destroy Adam. But then I remembered the look on her face at Christmas. That smug, satisfied smirk as she laughed at me in front of her family, knowing no one would defend me. The way Adam looked away. The way I had smiled, holding it all in, because I had no one on my side. That moment had cost me something. And Veronica didn't get to walk away from that for free. So I kept going. I reached out to a reporter I trusted, a woman named Sydney who specialized in financial exposés. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. But I asked questions. Hypotheticals. What would happen if someone found out a nonprofit was funneling money into offshore accounts? Would a journalist have legal protection if they published verified documents? What kind of timeline would a whistleblower face before legal action was triggered? Sydney was sharp. Careful. She asked her own questions. Do you have documents? Are you close to the subject? Is there a conflict of interest? I told her I was doing research for a friend. She didn't push. But I knew she was interested. Still, I didn't give her the file. Not yet. Instead, I made another copy, a physical one, printed on thick paper, sealed in an envelope. I didn't mail it. I delivered it. To someone Veronica wouldn't expect. Her late husband's sister, Marianne. Marianne had once been on the board of the foundation years ago. But after Harold's death, Veronica forced her out, claiming she was too emotional to handle financials. I'd met Marianne only twice, once at a family function, once at a funeral. She had kind eyes and a quiet voice. She wasn't flashy, didn't dress like the others. I remembered that she ran a small legal clinic out of Brooklyn. I went there unannounced, file in hand. She looked surprised to see me. Even more surprised when I handed her the envelope and said, "This is about Veronica. Please read it. You'll know what to do." She stared at me, searching my face for something, maybe sincerity, maybe permission. Then she nodded. And I walked away. It felt like nothing and everything. Back home, life went on. Adam talked about a new project at work. Clara posted about her trip to Turks and Caicos. June announced that she was launching a skincare line. Veronica continued her rounds of charity brunches, her carefully curated life unfolding in perfect, glittering order. But a shift had begun. Small things at first. A request for additional documentation from the IRS. A postponed fundraiser with no explanation. A subtle change in Veronica's Instagram, fewer posts, more generic captions, less personal engagement. She was circling. I watched in silence. Then, one afternoon, Adam came home early, pale and quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked. He hesitated. "Mom's being audited." My heart didn't skip a beat. It didn't need to. "She says someone tipped them off," he added. I nodded. "That's serious." He frowned. "She's freaking out." "I'm sure she'll handle it," I said and smiled. He didn't respond. In the following days, Veronica's calls to Adam increased. She started pulling him into things. "Can you help me go through these papers? Can you call the accountant?" Adam, ever the loyal son, complied. He didn't question. He didn't see. But I did. I watched him get pulled into her storm, and I let it happen. Because something deeper was unfolding now. The audit was just the beginning. Marianne had emailed me, just a single line. "We should talk." We met in a coffee shop in Manhattan. She wore a dark coat, her gray hair pulled back in a bun. She slid a folder across the table. "I verified everything," she said. "This goes far beyond negligence." I opened the folder. There were copies of financial reports, legal opinions, a list of known shell corporations. "She's been using the foundation to launder money from her late husband's estate," Marianne said quietly. "I suspected something years ago. I just couldn't prove it. Now we could." I asked her what she planned to do. She looked at me, firm and steady. "You came to me. But this has to come from you. If it goes public, the press will want a face. A story. A motive." I sipped my coffee. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no. That night, I found myself standing in the mirror, looking at my own reflection like I didn't recognize her. My hair was longer than it used to be. My eyes darker. There was a tightness in my expression, something focused and sharp. Not rage. Not grief. Readiness. I hadn't planned for this to become a crusade. I hadn't intended to burn down her world. But she had built her empire on silencing others, on using women's stories as currency while secretly draining the very systems meant to protect them. And maybe I had once been like Adam, too afraid to look closely. Not anymore. So I made the call. Sydney picked up after the second ring. "I have a story," I said. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later, wrapped in ivory cardstock and tied with a red silk ribbon. In Boston gold were the words, "The Veronica Foundation, Annual Winter Gala. Benefiting Women Who Rise." I stared at it for a long time, letting the message sink in. It wasn't just a party. It was her stage. Her kingdom. Her audience of admirers. This was where she would shine the brightest, and where she had the most to lose. Adam was thrilled when he saw it. "Mom included you this year," he said, holding the envelope like it was proof of progress. "She must be trying to make amends." I smiled at him, the way I always did. The way he expected me to. "I'm sure she is." What he didn't know was that the guest list wasn't the only thing that had changed. In the weeks following my meeting with Marianne, things had accelerated. Sydney, the journalist, had taken the story. She didn't publish it, not yet. But she'd begun fact-checking, contacting legal experts, quietly interviewing former employees of the foundation. One woman, who had handled donor relations, confessed that she had quit after noticing discrepancies in the reported figures. Another, an accountant, admitted under NDA that there had been years of unusual activity that she had been instructed to overlook. The pieces were aligning. And all we needed now was the spark. Sydney called me the day before the gala. "We're ready," she said. "The video's been edited. Documents are verified. It's scheduled to drop at 8:30 p.m. tomorrow." Perfect. The gala began at 7. The venue was the Montclair Hotel, a historic behemoth on Fifth Avenue known for its ballrooms and crystal chandeliers. The entire lobby was transformed, red carpets, camera flashes, a massive white tree lit with delicate ornaments. I arrived with Adam on my arm, dressed in a midnight blue gown that clung to my body like armor. People turned to look. Not because of who I was, but because I looked like I belonged. That, in Veronica's world, was the ultimate sin. She was waiting at the center of the ballroom, greeting guests with her signature air of benevolent royalty. Dressed in floor-length champagne satin, her blonde hair swept into an elegant twist, she looked every inch the icon she pretended to be. When she saw me, her smile faltered for just a second, and then returned, even wider than before. "Darling," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look radiant." "So do you," I replied, with matching sweetness. Adam looked pleased. He thought things were healing. They weren't. We mingled for an hour. I played my role, smiling at donors, complimenting dresses, nodding along to hollow conversations about empowerment and philanthropy. Veronica gave a short toast, full of vague wisdom about rising from hardship and the power of women lifting each other. I counted the seconds until 8:30. Then it came. It started with a flicker on the giant projection screen at the front of the ballroom. Veronica had hired a team to create a montage of the foundation's highlights, footage of women helped by the programs, testimonials, soft piano music, shots of Veronica smiling at ribbon cuttings and handing out scholarships. But that wasn't what played. Instead, the screen cut to black. Then white text appeared. "What if the story you've been told is a lie?" There was a beat of confusion. Guests turned toward the screen, murmurs rising. Then the video began. It started with a shot of Veronica at a fundraising event, smiling, holding a check for $1 million. The voiceover, calm and measured, began. "The Veronica Foundation claims to help women in crisis. But beneath the surface, a darker truth has been uncovered." Documents flashed on the screen, tax filings, wire transfers, screenshots of emails. The voice continued. Millions in donor money have been funneled into offshore accounts, spent on luxury properties, and filtered through fake consulting firms with no traceable services provided. I watched her face from across the room. At first, disbelief. Then confusion. Then something deeper. Recognition. She stepped forward, toward the technician booth, panic rising in her eyes. "Turn that off," she snapped. "This isn't authorized. Stop the video!" But no one moved. Because Sydney had arranged the upload through the venue itself, under the Foundation's own name. Legally, the event staff had to finish playing it. The room had gone silent. Every guest, hundreds of them, watched as the footage revealed the discrepancies between her speeches and her bank records. Interviews with former employees. Legal analysis from compliance experts. A quote from Marianne. "This isn't mismanagement. It's theft." Adam turned to me, stunned. "What is this?" I didn't answer. Because the video wasn't done. The final frame showed a scanned letter from the IRS confirming an active investigation, dated the previous week. Then the screen went dark. Silence. Thick and stunned. Veronica stood frozen in the middle of the room, her hands trembling. Slowly, she turned to face the crowd. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "It's slander. Someone hacked us. This is fake." Clara was the first to speak. "Is it?" Veronica blinked. "Excuse me?" Clara stepped forward, heels clicking against the marble floor. "Is it fake, Mom? Because I recognize that signature. It's from Dad's old trust. The one you said was closed." Veronica opened her mouth, then closed it again. June joined her sister. "You told me the Foundation couldn't afford to help with my divorce last year. But you bought a Miami penthouse?" Veronica's face twisted. "Girls, don't do this here. This is a public attack. Someone's trying to ruin us." "No, someone's trying to tell the truth," Clara said sharply. She turned to Adam. "Did you know?" He looked at them, then at me. "What the hell is going on?" Veronica turned to him too, desperation in her eyes. "Adam, I swear this is someone targeting us. It's not real." "It is," I said. Everyone turned. I stood at the edge of the crowd, perfectly still, my voice calm. "It's all real." Veronica's face strained of color. "You?" I nodded. "You did this?" Adam whispered. "I exposed it," I said. "Someone had to." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Why?" I could have listed 100 reasons. But I said only one. "Because you all forgot I was there." "But I didn't forget anything." Veronica's voice broke. "You evil little..." "Don't..." I cut her off. Clara and June were still staring at her. The guests had begun whispering, pulling out phones. Someone was filming. Veronica looked around and realized it. This wasn't just a scandal. It was public. It was irreversible. She turned to Adam again, but he didn't move. The damage was done. The next morning, Sydney's article dropped. Front page. "Queen of Empowerment Under Fire. How the Veronica Foundation Lied to the World." Within hours, major donors pulled out. Public statements were issued. Investigations began. I received an email from Marianne. "It's happening. Thank you." Adam didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. He didn't call. I didn't need him to. I sat on the couch in the quiet of our apartment, sipping tea, watching the city lights through the window. Somewhere out there, Veronica was scrambling to rewrite the narrative, trying to find someone to blame, someone to control. But she wouldn't find me. Not anymore. Because I had stepped out of the shadows. And she was finally the one left in the dark. Veronica didn't go down quietly. That would have been too easy. She screamed. She clawed. She called every favor she could find, threatened lawsuits, hired PR firms, posted hollow denials on her social media feeds. She tried to spin the story, said the documents were falsified, that the video had been doctored, that her enemies were women who couldn't handle her success. But the internet has a strange way of exposing the truth when it's delivered with undeniable receipts. The evidence was airtight. Sydney's article had been backed by scanned documents, witness testimonies, timelines, even forensic accounting reports, each piece more damning than the last. Every time Veronica opened her mouth to defend herself, another wave of facts crashed down to drown her out. By the end of the week, the Veronica Foundation had lost over 90% of its funding. Sponsors dropped out. Clients fled. The board held an emergency meeting without her. And on Friday morning, the state attorney's office officially confirmed that an investigation was underway. That was when the phone calls started. First, Adams. He called from his office, his voice tight. "Did you know this would happen?" "Yes," I said. "You planned this. I exposed this." There was a pause. Then, quieter. Why didn't you tell me? I looked out the window, watching snow fall over the city like a silent curtain. Would you have believed me? He didn't answer. I hung up. Next was Clara. Her voicemail was clipped, panicked. Tell me you didn't know about the offshore accounts with Dad's name on them. Tell me this wasn't part of your plan. Then June. Did you know she used my name to open a secondary account? You said it was just about the foundation. Lena, what the hell else is in those files? It was unfolding faster than I had anticipated. Marianne had gone forward with the second wave of evidence, not just about the foundation, but about Veronica's use of her late husband's estate. She had forged documents, moved funds into dummy trusts, used her daughters' names to authorize financial transfers they knew nothing about. What had started as corporate fraud had become deeply personal. Clara and June weren't just betrayed as daughters. They were complicit, unknowingly, legally. The legal clinic where Marianne worked had begun preparing statements on their behalf, distancing them from the fraud, listing them as victims. But damage was already done. And at the center of it all, Veronica. I had thought she might reach out. That she might come to my door, even call, to scream or to beg. She didn't. Instead, it was Adam who came home. He arrived late, looking older than I remembered, his suit wrinkled, his hair a mess, his shoulders slumped. He stood in the doorway like a child who had lost his way. She's gone, he said quietly. I blinked. Gone? She left. Packed a bag, disappeared. No one knows where she is. Clara thinks she flew to London. June says Switzerland. I nodded. Probably somewhere without extradition. He didn't laugh. He looked at me, eyes tired. Is this what you wanted? No, I said. But it's what needed to happen. He sat on the couch, leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I know. She used all of us. Yes. And you knew. You saw it all. I watched her for years, I said, my voice calm. She was careful with everyone else. But with me? She let the mask slip. Because she thought I was no one. Adam swallowed. You waited. You planned this for, what, years? No. I endured her for years. The plan came later. He looked up at me, something shifting behind his eyes. You destroyed her. No, Adam, I said. She destroyed herself. I just held up the mirror. There was a long silence. Then, softly, he asked, Can we come back from this? And I realized in that moment that he wasn't asking about her. He was asking about us. I sat down across from him. Looked him in the eye. You never chose me, I said. Not once. Not when she mocked me, not when she humiliated me, not when she erased me. I didn't know how to stand up to her. You didn't want to. He looked down. I loved you, I continued. But love doesn't survive silence. And yours was deafening. He didn't fight me. Didn't beg. Maybe he understood, finally, what I had been trying to tell him all along. Or maybe he just realized I was already gone. I left the next morning. I packed one suitcase, just clothes, notebooks, a few keepsakes. I didn't take anything from the apartment we'd shared. Not the wedding photos. Not the dishes we'd picked out together. Not the ring he'd left on the nightstand like a quiet apology. I left it all. The city felt different outside those doors. Brighter. Sharper. Like it belonged to me again. I moved into a small studio in Brooklyn. Rented, modest, full of light. I took freelance work. I drank coffee in the mornings without rushing. I slept without waking to the sound of Guild breathing beside me. And then one day, the letter came. It was from Richard. Veronica's husband. He was alive, or had been, until 6 years ago. The letter was dated 4 months before his death. It had been mailed to a P.O. box Veronica never accessed. Marianne had found it after all the dust settled. She'd scanned it and sent it to me. Lena, it began. If you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I didn't know who else to trust. But I always saw you. Even when the others didn't. The letter was brief but clear. He had suspected Veronica of hiding money. Of manipulating the family trust. He had started documenting everything, quietly. But then his health declined. And he died before he could act. He had left breadcrumbs. And somehow, I had followed them. That night, I sat in the window of my studio, the city humming beneath me, and I cried for the first time. Not out of grief. Not out of rage. But release. I wasn't just reclaiming my voice. I was honoring his. The news broke a week later. Veronica had been located in Geneva. Interpol was involved. Charges were stacking. International fraud, misuse of charitable funds, wire fraud, trust violations. Clara and June issued statements of separation. Adam resigned from his firm and retreated from public life. The Veronica Foundation was formally dissolved. Its remaining funds, what was left after asset seizures, were redistributed to real women's shelters. Sydney called to thank me. Her article had won awards. She offered to ghostwrite a book with me. I said no. Because this wasn't about fame. It was about closure. I didn't burn her world because she insulted me. I did it because she thought she could. Because she thought I was forgettable. But I had remembered everything. And when I finally walked away, there was nothing left to say. Not to her. Not to Adam. Not to anyone who had stood by in silence while she made me small. This was the final cut. And I didn't look back. The headlines faded eventually. They always do. Scandals burn bright, then flicker out, replaced by fresher cases and newer villains. The public has a short memory. But the people who lived through it, we remember. I never went back to Manhattan. Brooklyn became my new world, smaller, quieter, warmer in a way I hadn't expected. There was a cafe on the corner where the barista learned my name, a bookstore with crooked shelves and creaky floors, a park where the same 3 dogs chased the same orange ball every morning. No one knew who I was. No one cared about my last name, or who I had been married to. I was Lena. Just Lena. That was enough. I took freelance jobs again, tax reviews for small law offices, compliance consulting for startups. Work that was honest, clear, and mine. There was comfort in spreadsheets, in order, in clean lines of logic after so many years of chaos disguised as tradition. I rebuilt my life one invoice at a time. But memory has its own gravity. And some stories don't end when you walk away from them. Veronica's trial took nearly a year to begin. She was extradited, booked, and released on bail so high it made the news. The charges stacked like a tower: wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, obstruction, trust mismanagement, even misrepresentation to a federal charity oversight board. I followed it quietly. Not obsessively. Just enough to know. Clara and June both testified. Marianne too. Adam did not. I didn't blame him. When the verdict came in, guilty on all counts, it barely registered. I had already closed that chapter. But then came the book deal. It started as an email. A small publisher. They had seen the article Sydney wrote. They wanted to know if I would tell the full story, from my perspective. Not a scandal memoir, the editor assured me. A story about erasure. About power. About the cost of silence. I declined. But I couldn't sleep that night. Because there was truth in what they were offering. Not just publication, but clarity. Ownership. A chance to take what had been done to me and make something from it, not revenge, but narrative. So I said yes. The writing took 6 months. I didn't name names. I changed details. But the story was real. A woman who had been erased by a family obsessed with image. A woman who had waited in silence until she knew how to strike. A woman who remembered everything. The title came easily, The Forgotten Wife. It wasn't a bestseller. But it didn't have to be. It reached the people who needed it. Women messaged me, hundreds of them, saying they saw themselves in my words. They weren't just thanking me. They were reclaiming something of their own. And somewhere in all that, I began to heal. I started doing small talks at women's shelters. I met survivors of financial abuse, emotional abuse, invisible abuse. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, only shadows. We shared stories. We laughed. We cried. We remembered together. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Adam emailed me once. Just one line, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Not because I hated him. But because I didn't owe him closure. I had given him years. I had given him silence. And when I needed him to choose, he hadn't. That was enough. I saw him once after that, by accident. He was walking down Court Street, alone, hands in his pockets. Our eyes met. He stopped. I didn't. I kept walking. I heard him say my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. I had already said goodbye. Clara and June reached out too. Clara sent a message through Marianne, something about wanting to apologize, to talk. June emailed me, longer, more thoughtful. She said she had started therapy. Said she was unpacking years of what she believed was normal. Said she finally understood what I had lived through. I replied. I told her I was glad she was healing. That was all. Because forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else. It's a room you walk into alone when you're ready. I wasn't there yet. Maybe I never would be. And that was okay. One afternoon, I found myself in the bookstore near my apartment. My book sat on a lower shelf, modest and quiet. I picked it up, flipped through it, not really reading. Just remembering. A young woman walked by, did a double take. Is that yours? She asked. I nodded. She smiled, soft and shy. Thank you. That book, it helped me leave. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing that felt true. I'm glad you remembered yourself. She laughed, teary. That's exactly what it felt like. We didn't exchange names. We didn't need to. Some stories live between strangers in the quietest ways. Later that night, I walked home as snow began to fall, slow and steady, blanketing the street in silence. The world felt still. Like a clean page. I paused outside my building, looked up at the windows. Warm light glowing. Music faint behind glass. My life. My space. No shadows. No performances. Just peace. And then my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Veronica Hale sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. Not with joy. Not with triumph. Just completion. Because some chapters don't end with fire or fury. Some end with a simple full stop. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked upstairs. At my desk, I opened a blank document. No title. No plan. Just space. A canvas. I began to type. Not a memoir. Not a confession. Just a new beginning. Because the price of memory is high. But so is the value. And I had paid in full. In the quiet aftermath of every storm, when the chaos has settled and the dust hangs suspended in stillness, there comes a moment of reckoning, a space where truth and clarity meet, and from their collision rises something unshakable, perspective. If there's one lesson that emerged from the ashes of Lena's journey, it's that silence does not mean weakness, and remembering, truly remembering, is a radical act of power. We live in a world that often celebrates loudness, visibility, and dominance. It rewards those who command the room, who shout their victories, who wield power unapologetically. But there is another kind of strength that is seldom recognized, one that simmers beneath the surface. It's the strength of endurance, of observation, of the ones who are overlooked and underestimated. The strength of the quiet observer, the so-called forgotten one. Lena's story is not just about revenge or justice. It is a reflection of what happens when a person is consistently made to feel small, unimportant, invisible. Over time, that feeling builds not only resentment, but clarity. It sharpens the edges of a person's perception. It teaches them to see through the cracks in the facade. And when that person chooses not to explode but to observe, not to retaliate in haste but to gather truth like a thread, what they eventually create is not just retribution, it's revolution. In relationships, especially those bound by family, tradition, or appearances, it's easy to fall into the trap of roles. The dutiful daughter-in-law. The silent wife. The outsider who's expected to be grateful just for being allowed in the room. These roles often come with unspoken rules. Don't challenge the power dynamic, don't speak up when you're hurt, don't disrupt the carefully curated image of unity. But the truth is, unity built on erasure isn't unity at all, it's submission. Lena spent years trying to fit in, to be accepted by a family that only saw her as a prop, a background character in their glossy story. And in doing so, she gave away pieces of herself. This is something many people, especially women, will recognize. The slow erosion of self in the name of keeping peace. The quiet internal bargains, maybe if I try harder, if I smile more, if I stay silent, things will get better. But they rarely do. Because those who are determined to hold power by diminishing others will always find new ways to redraw the lines, to keep their authority unchallenged. What Lena did differently was this: she didn't shatter. She watched. She remembered. She made a choice not to scream into the void, but to let the silence speak for itself, until the day it would echo louder than any voice in the room. And that choice, to be deliberate, patient, meticulous, is one of the most underappreciated forms of courage. It takes strength not to react in the moment. It takes vision to play the long game. And most of all, it takes faith, in yourself, in the truth, in the idea that dignity doesn't come from the approval of others, but from the quiet conviction that you know who you are. There's a price to remembering, of course. Holding on to pain, even for the sake of justice, can be heavy. It changes a person. It can make you guarded, cautious, unable to trust even those who haven't earned your suspicion. But the alternative, forgetting, pretending, erasing your own wounds to protect someone else's image, is far worse. Because when you forget, you vanish. You cease to exist on your own terms. And Lena chose not to vanish. She chose to honor her memory, not just of the wrongs done to her, but of her own worth. That's what made her dangerous. That's what made her free. Another crucial lesson in her story is about the illusion of family loyalty. We're taught that blood is sacred, that family must be protected at all costs. But what happens when family becomes the very source of your erasure? What happens when love is conditional, based on obedience and silence. The answer is not easy, but it's necessary. You choose yourself. Not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Because true love, familial or otherwise, does not demand your invisibility. It does not thrive on hierarchy or performance. It sees you. It hears you. It holds space for your truth. Adam's failure wasn't just that he didn't protect Lena. It was that he refused to see her. His loyalty was so deeply entangled in his mother's identity that he couldn't separate truth from legacy. And by the time he did, it was too late. That's the thing about silence. It leaves room for clarity, but also for consequences. And when you choose not to speak for someone you love, you may wake up one day to find they're no longer waiting for you to find your voice. They've already moved on. The beauty of Lena's ending isn't that she got revenge, it's that she found peace. Not through destruction, but through reclamation. She didn't just tear down Veronica's empire. She rebuilt her own. She created a life that belonged to her, one that wasn't built on proximity to power or performance, but on truth. And in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. Her book wasn't a bestseller, but it changed lives. Her talks weren't televised, but they sparked awakenings. Her story didn't make her famous, but it made her free. And sometimes, that's the best kind of victory. One that doesn't need applause. One that exists in the quiet spaces, the ones where you sit with yourself and know, without doubt, that you've returned to your own skin. That you've made a home inside your truth. That you remember who you are. And in the end, perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Not that silence is golden, but that it is powerful. That memory is not weakness. That being forgotten doesn't make you forgettable. And that when the world tries to write you out, you always have the pen in your hand. You can always write yourself back in. So if you find yourself in the margins, erased by the ones who claim to love you, reduced to a shadow in someone else's spotlight, know this: your voice matters, even if they pretend it doesn't. Your story is valid, even if they try to rewrite it. And your power, quiet, steady, enduring, is greater than they will ever understand. Remember everything. Choose yourself. And never, ever let them convince you that silence is the same thing as defeat. Because it isn't. It's preparation. It's protection. It's the stillness before the rise. And when you do rise, let it be not to scream or to destroy, but to reclaim. To stand where they never thought you could. And to remind them, gently, that forgetting you was their greatest mistake. You, after all, remembered everything.